Rugby League Back Chat is sponsored by TotalRL.com. Hello and welcome to this week's Back Chat from the Pit Sports Bar in Leeds, and as ever we've got a fantastic panel for you today, including Martyn Sadler, who's from League Express newspapers, Richard de la Riviere, who's also from League Express newspapers, other trade papers are available, and Ralph Rimmer, who's the Chief Executive of the Rugby Football League. Where do we start in a week like, I mean, what can we talk about? There's nothing going on in Rugby League. Ralph, the eights have gone. Relieved that it's all over? Relieved that the eights have gone?
I'm really relieved that it's all over. It's, as I've explained before, it's far more complicated than just the a release of a competition structure that was previously in existence. I think we found some peace for the sport, and that was the main thing for me. So clearly the divisional structure changes, so be it. As long as we've got a flag everybody can salute, great. One of
the things that surprised me, Martyn, was how happy people seem to be afterwards. You know, given all the vitriol building up to this meeting last Friday, we were expecting a volcano to erupt somewhere on the outskirts of Manchester. And a couple of hours after they'd all gone in, they all came out 68% in favour of the changes. And everyone's saying, yeah, OK, we'll get on with it now.
Well, I mean, 68% is decisive, isn't it? Yeah. I mean, if the Brexit vote had been that big, there'd be far less argument afterwards. So once something is so decisive, I mean, 9 Championship and League One clubs voted, you know, in favour of the motion when, you know, the advisory group led by Andrew Chalmers, who was on this programme last week, you know, was saying that they wanted a unified front to oppose the proposal. Well, clearly that didn't happen. And I think there comes a point where you've got to accept, if the vote is that strong, that it's decisive. So, you know, we may as well all get on with it. And Andrew Chalmers himself, I mean, made it very clear afterwards that, you know, the decision's been taken, we're going to make the best of it now, there's no more argument really. And I mean, there are still some things to be decided, and Ralph can tell us more about it, but, you know, the financial distribution next year, I mean, until now the distribution's been skewed for the Championship clubs in favour of the top 4 clubs so they can compete in the qualifiers. Well, clearly the rationale for that no longer exists. So I would suspect that we'll have a much more even distribution of funds next year and have a great competition. I'm actually looking forward to seeing the Championship having a grand final. Last time we had one was in 2007, 21,000 people at Headingley, if you remember. What a great thing that could be.
I mean, when you drill down into this, that top 5 in the Championship, actually, you know, 1 up, 1 down sounds, oh, that's a bit brutal on the Championship, but the top 5 in the Championship actually opens it up, for my money, in terms of teams that could be promoted.
Well, I'm really pleased that 1 up, 1 down has come back, because I think there's been promotion and relegation in about 40-something years in the history of Rugby League, and the team that's gone up as the best team has only ever finished bottom twice. That was Hunslet in '88 and Lee in 2005. It's never happened. So if history is any guide, then 1 up, 1 down is a decent system, and we won't get the yo-yo syndrome that people talk about. I mean, like the other guys, I mean, I'm pleased it's over, but I really think we've had a lost decade. I think we're clearing up from the mess, which I think Richard Lewis and Nigel Wood were responsible for. Those 2 guys just changed things for change's sake. They couldn't stop tinkering with things. Why did the top 5 become the top 6? Why did it then become the top 8? Licensing was badly thought through and failed. The Super 8s was another catastrophe. We've just got to get back to something. The top 5 was pretty successful when we had it. 1 up, 1 down works. So I'm pretty pleased.
Yeah, and I mean, we heard the Featherstone chairman Mark Campbell this week said he's considering whether he's going to carry on investing in his club. But when you look at it, actually it benefits sides like Featherstone and Lee this year, for example, because that top 5 would have given them a real hope.
I think for a club like Featherstone, you know, Mark's, you know, I like Mark a lot, known him a long time, but I do find his comments a little confusing. You know, we have a guaranteed promotion relegation place. They'll be in a competition, and Martyn's alluded to the kind of the financial restructure that will go forward, and we're working on that currently, but ostensibly the monies in that competition will concertina, so it will make it more even. I think that makes for a hell of a lot of drama. It makes for a top 5 system where somebody is going to be rewarded with a promotion place. I can't understand why anybody would walk away from that.
But there is some money in the waters with the way we get to a 14-team championship next year. It's almost like Bradford are told, well, if you're not going to finish top because you're car, then you can win the final, and if you don't win the final, we're going to give you another chance. They seem almost determined to get Bradford into.
Where would we be without conspiracy theory? I would be lost. I wouldn't be able to get out of bed in the morning. That's why we conspiracy theory.
Well, it's rugby league, isn't it?
Exactly.
That's the thing about rugby league is everyone knows the answer. Everyone. You're going to have to get used to this. You're going to have to get used to this. Everyone knows where the game is.
Well, given the way Bradford have gone in the last few years, I wouldn't bank on them, being there. If I'm really honest about it, I hope they are though, because I think they should be in the championship, and I'd very much like to see a championship with Bradford in it. So let's hope they are successful. But I'm actually quite glad to see the championship moving to 14 teams, because I don't like the loop fixtures. 6 additional loop fixtures in Super League. I think the Rob Elson and the people who run Super League are going to have to think very carefully about how to promote those games, because I think the fans clearly don't like them. We had a readers' poll in our newspaper, and 60% of the respondents, or over 60%, said they'd like 14 teams in Super League rather than 12 teams and loop fixtures. The Championship have gone for that, and I think that's great, and I think it will just make their competition all the more attractive. And I hope that when the new TV contracts come to be negotiated, by then we'll have a thriving championship that will actually be a saleable asset and we'll be able to generate funds.
Yeah, but you see, people would say we have a thriving championship now. I mean, this last season we've had Toronto in there, and we've had Toulouse in there, and we've had, at the start of the season you look and think, oof, Lee are going to be up there, and they weren't. So that tells you there's been a lot of equal.
It's been very exciting.
But nobody's interested in televising.
They are interested in televising the qualifiers, of course, which Sky are doing at the moment. But the trouble with the championship this year is that it was 2 leagues of 6, really. The top 6 was tremendous, and I was really disappointed actually when Lee didn't get into the top 4, because I think they'd have been very competitive. That the bottom 6 were cast adrift, really.
Yeah.
So I don't think that's very satisfactory myself. But
just you're the historian. You've already established you're the stats man for the day. So just remind us how the top 5 works, because people have a vague memory of if you finish first, don't you only have to win 1 game to get grand final? So just explain.
I love the top 5. I mean, it started in '98. Well, in terms of Super League, and Australia had used it for many years before that. So basically, you start off with 4th v 5th, which is an elimination game. And the first ever playoff game you might remember was Saints v Bradford, and Graham Bradley got sent off for basically nothing. I mean, so you start off
that
with
was his last game.
Yeah, I know. You start off with the do or die game straight away. Then second plays third the same weekend. The winner of second v third then plays first for the right to get to Old Trafford. The loser of second v third then plays the winner of 4th v 5th. And then they go to the penultimate weekend, play the loser of 1st v 2nd, and then you've got probably 1st v 2nd. Well, that's what happened in '98, '99, I think 2000 as well.
Such a simple system.
2 teams.
And it's
very exciting.
Simplicity wins the day.
One drops out each week. That's
the way I always think of it. One goes each week.
I mean, a lot of people would say top 5 is the way to go. A lot of people would say top 5 is great because, I mean, if you'd had top 5 this year, looking at the table after 23 rounds, you're going all the way down to 10th with clubs who could still make the top 5. Sure. But is there that element again of rugby league going to have to explain how it works to the outside world?
Well, I'm just going to let Richard continue to do it. He makes a far better job of it than I ever will. I just think, as you described, top 5 means there'll be a lot of teams involved in the top 5 and in who creates the top 5, and of course there'll be 2 relegation spots to dodge at the bottom as well. So
2?
There'll be 1 and a playoff place at the bottom. So
I thought it was just 1 up, 1 down. I thought it was only 1 down.
No, underneath. No, Championship to League 1.
Oh, sorry. I was talking about
exclusive then.
Whoa, yeah. Oh, wow. That was a vote.
So, you got 14 teams that are going to be involved in some action, and that's what you want.
Yeah. You had your hand up there. I thought you were going to speak.
Well, no, I mean, as I say, the really interesting thing is that the League Leaders' Shield under a top 5 system is really worth winning, because you get the easy route to Old Trafford. So I thought it was interesting last week. I mean, St Helens, got the League Leaders' Shield, and 1 or 2 of them looked a bit sort of less than impressed to get it. I thought, they were happy, but they weren't ecstatic to get it in the way that they would do if they won the grand final.
Wasn't Castleford the year before, or when Huddersfield won it?
Well,
it meant something.
The thing about when Huddersfield won it and when Castleford won it, it's really interesting because they both those clubs hadn't won anything for years. So, you know, to win it meant an enormous amount. St Helens are a club that's been more used to winning big events, big games and so on. So the League Leaders Shield probably meant a bit less to some of them than perhaps you'd like it to. But next year, I think, you know, I think they will be ecstatic to win it, because it means they'll get that relatively simple trip through to Old Trafford.
I think they'd probably seen Castleford celebrating and then being mocked by other people.
Well, that
which is unfortunate. I mean, I think they had every right to celebrate it,
So,
but of course,
so
bit of schadenfreude. You know, people enjoy.
It's a great achievement to win the League Leaders Shield.
Of course it is.
The modern day equivalent of the county cups, really, isn't it? You know, if you're a Wakefield, all due respect to Wakefield, but if you've not won anything for years, to win a county cup means something. If you're a Leeds, then perhaps less so.
But ultimately, you can't beat winning a major trophy in front of 70-odd thousand people, can you? You know, at Wembley or Old Trafford, that's what really sticks in the mind and the memory.
One of the things that's been mooted, and on a different platform, we were talking with Chris Radlinski and Carl Fitzpatrick from Wigan and Warrington, very, very recent ex-players, talking about quickening the game up. And that's something that has struck me this year, is how slow the game has become. You can kick off, even at non-TV games, you can have a 2-hour game, 7:45 kick-off, 9:45 full-time. And a lot of that is down to the messing about the dropouts, the scrums, etc., etc. So, Ralph, are you in favour? Because this is going to have to be a game-wide agreement. It's not just something that the Super League clubs can implement, is it? The game
that's
as
right.
a whole
Whereas you've alluded to the fact we're looking to implement some change on those things. The Laws Committee will be involved in that, because we have a protocol which gets us through there. You know, the Australians recognise that the stoppage time in particular is something that needs to be addressed, and in the end, you know, you do want to see more tries in the end. That's what the game's about, more tries. You get that if you reduce stoppage time, perhaps reduce the number of interchanges, and all of a sudden you've got something that moves more quickly and brings in more fatigue, and there will be more tries.
Well, not long ago, Saints scored about 13 or 14 tries against Hull FC. I'm not sure we all want to see more of that.
One of the big problems with the game in the modern era is that we have this obsession with changing the rules. I mean, you know, we in the media will get an email every December saying next year there's going to be some new rules, and we have 2, 3, 4. One year there was 7 rule changes. If you go back to, say, 95 when Greg McCallum came over, and he was one for doing this, we've probably had 70 or 80 rule changes since then.
But some of the interpretations. But the rule changes. Who's not liking the corner flag isn't in play.
Well, all right, yeah.
That's who's not liking the 40-20.
But in all the time I've been a football fan, I can think of about 2 rule changes since the mid-80s.
But that's a dull two-dimensional sport.
Well, okay. But when I interview an ex-player every week in League Express, and every time I ask an ex-player what they think of the modern game, they've got a negative view. When we constantly think,
but
they're not like that in football or cricket or tennis or other sports. It's in rugby league.
Well, you do in football. They go, you can't tackle anymore. You know, things move on, things change.
I think you do.
But we
look at what cricket's done with that.
Look
at, you know, people are recognising that the world changes. They recognise there's some societal change. You've got to adapt to. Say the cricket changes that they're talking about currently, that is an attempt, and we'll see whether it's successful or not. And we know that you know, traditionalists don't like that, and I am fairly traditional in my rugby league background. But in the end, you've got to produce something that entertains.
But the fact that games last so long, at least partially these days, is down to the fact that when players are injured, it takes so much more time to, you know, examine them on the field, and then perhaps take them off the field. You know, the head injury assessment procedure and that sort of thing inevitably, you know, makes games longer, and I don't really see how that can.
But
change.
what about? Would you not be in favour? If you're saying don't tinker, but would you not love to see a shot clock on a dropout instead of seeing someone kicking the ball out of play, someone falling down underneath the sticks and going, oh, I've hurt my leg? Wouldn't you rather the referee go, well, you've got a minute, and if not, it's a penalty?
I've got no problems with the game speeded up in that way, but when we start playing around with the ruck, we've had seasons in the past where we've all complained that it's too quick and we've got too much dummy half running and then not enough skill.
Yeah.
You know, I've seen people say that, you know, the modern game is for big forwards and hookers scooting from dummy half, and the Tony Milers of the game have been lost. And if you speed the game up too much, that's the result of that. We can always say it's too quick.
There's a lot of rubbish talk though about this. If you look back to, you know, videos of the game in the early 1960s, and you can see examples of players who were really today regarded as great players of the game. I mean, I was watching a test match between Great Britain and New Zealand at Headingley in 1961 when Great Britain lost 22 points to 7 against an entirely amateur New Zealand team, and you know, you'd got all the big stars playing, you know, the Billy Bostons and so on, and yet, the Brian McTeagues in the forward, and yet, the skill level certainly didn't look greater than it is today. In fact, it looked far more limited, if we're really honest.
You'd have
Well, they would
the
be
5
playing at a
metre,
slow pace.
Yeah, of course,
5 metre tackle, and you'd have unlimited tackles. Then,
Yes,
wouldn't you,
that's
as
right. The
well?
game has evolved,
it's a very
and
different game.
the skills of the game at any one point in time reflect the context of the game.
Of course.
At that moment.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I think it's a really unprofitable conversation to say that the skill levels are not what they were 20 or
It
whatever
depends
years
how far
ago.
back you go, though. I think
does.
just this last decade, I think for entertainment and skills, it's been pretty low.
Well,
Just comparing to the early Super League.
Just
days.
as a last
agree.
word on this, Ralph, before we go to the break.
Yeah.
Last word, Ralph. If there's one change, what would you make? Chief Executive of the RFL? What would
I would be introducing shot clocks and cutting down the amount of stoppage time, and perhaps looking at a reduction in interchanges.
And that's all. That would be across whatever's agreed. If the Super League puts something forward, does it have to be agreed by the whole game?
I think if it was shot clocks, probably not, because that's about game management and time management. I think interchanges, yes, that would apply to everybody. Yeah.
Okay, fascinating stuff, and lots more fascinating stuff to come in part 2 in just a few moments' time. We're going to take a break. It's not going to be that long, so any Cocker Spaniels watching, don't let your attention wander too much.
want your
We'll be
attention.
back after this break. Hello and welcome back to part 2 of this week's Back Chat from the Pit Sports Bar in Leeds. As we mentioned before, an excellent panel with us today. Martyn Sadler from League Express, Ralph Rimmer, who's the Chief Executive of the Rugby Football League, and Richard de la Riviere, who's also from League Express. We're going to get back onto politics because we can't get too far away from men in suits at the moment. But let's get to the men in strips right now, the action we've seen over the last few weeks and the action to come. The top 8s, as we've said, I think since May, is cut and dried now, isn't it, in the Super League. But the middle 8s, wow. What's going to happen?
Well, the interesting thing at the weekend, I think, was the fact that Leeds are probably just about safe now, because it should come down to points difference. If Toronto beat Leeds, I don't think they'll have enough points. I think Toronto and Toronto and London needed bigger wins this weekend than they eventually got. They didn't get them, so I think Leeds have got the points difference now to just about be safe if they do lose to Toronto. They've also got Halifax to play, so they should just about be okay. But yeah, the £1 million game, it's going to be incredibly exciting, whoever it is.
Well,
I mean,
that's a question.
Toronto v
Chief Executive
Toulouse
of
or
the Rugby
London.
Football League, isn't it? What happens if it's in Toronto?
Well, it's looking like it will be in Toronto, isn't it? So
Right.
I've not missed one yet. I won't miss that one either, should it be over there. And I've really enjoyed the Toronto ride so far. I think they bring something different to us. The city of Toronto certainly brings something different to us. And I've no doubt an occasion like that in a different continent would do also.
Televised, it will be televised, won't
Yes.
it? Yeah. When?
It's 7 p.m. Sunday.
7 p.m. Sunday. Right. Excellent. Good. If that happens.
If I've got that right, yeah.
I would suggest that of the top 3, Salford, Leeds, Hull KR, looks safe. But I would suggest that the most vulnerable, because of this points difference issue, could be a Hull KR. They need another win.
Yes, I think they do, but I think they'll survive okay. And I agree with Ralph and Richard that Toronto looked like the host of the £1 million game. The question is who will be the visitors. I mean, Widnes have still got a chance, but they visit Toronto this weekend.
We've written them off. I'm saying collectively as a game.
I wouldn't write them off completely.
No.
I mean, the odds are absolutely stacked against them. And if they don't win in Toronto this weekend, I think that does it for them probably.
Yeah. Is their last game against Hull KR away?
I think it is, yes.
Yeah, so that will be a tough one.
I mean, at the moment, I would say Toulouse look like the favourite to be in the £1 million game with Toronto. And what a great game it was at the weekend, between those two clubs. And how unlucky were Toulouse, really, to not win that game. That try by Mason, Kate and Brown, no video referee at at the game. I mean, I'm anti-video referees, but the one game in which you know, there wasn't a video referee, was the one game in which they could have done with one.
That's the problem. You see, once you've opened Pandora's box, you can't close it again.
Well, you've just got to live with the results, and you know they have done. You know, that's just how it's gone. But and Gareth O'Brien kicking another absolutely crucial drop goal. You know, his career is going to be remembered for that, isn't it? Kicking key drop goals at crucial times.
Yeah, it's a game with bite. Who do you think will bring most to Super League? Who do you think will benefit most? If it is to be Toronto Toulouse in the £1 million game, and there's a lot of assumptions going on here, but which of those would benefit Super League at the moment the most?
Well, I've always wanted a second French team, and I'm adamant that the game needs a second French team. But Toulouse have admitted that perhaps they're just not quite ready for it yet. So Toronto,
I think it's a stadium issue with them.
Yeah, Toronto do look ready right now. I mean, they'll have to strengthen a bit. I don't think they've been quite as good as I expected them to be in the 8. I thought they'd finish in the top 3, but I think they are the one club out of the 4 championship clubs that are very much.
I think the crucial result for them was losing at home to Hull KR, wasn't it?
Yeah,
that's right.
That sort of settled it for them. That they'd probably have to go to the £1 million game after that. But the thing about them is, of course, when you talk about Super League, they've got an owner for whom money seems to be no object in terms of recruiting players. So I think we'll find that, you know, the players that they recruit will be, you know, will give them a good Super League squad. So I mean, Richard said earlier that on a one-up, one-down basis, it's very rare that the team that comes up has actually gone down, you know, in first place. And you would imagine Toronto, once they come up, they would be able to stay there, wouldn't you?
I would have thought so. Everyone seems to have discounted the Broncos here and all this.
Yeah, we do that on this programme.
I think they've got a good shot.
They're a good side.
And those two owners in particular, the two Davids, they're both characters, and they bring something to the game just in their own right.
And how much relief do you have as the chief exec of the RFL that if Toronto come up next year, you don't have to sort those fixtures out? You can just say
I suspect we'll be involved at some point. It's been a journey. I think I described it as a journey earlier. And when we began the journey, I pitched in front of the Championship League One clubs and said there will be some speed bumps along the way here. So we're either going to decide we're all going to do it together. When we get to those inevitable complications, we're going to win our way through them. Or we're not going to do it. And at the time, it was unanimous support for the club. And I think inevitably we have found some complications in the pragmatics of it. We worked through as many different scenarios as possible, but there are just things that blindside you.
But you put your faith in, you know, in David Argyle, didn't you? And David Argyle has rewarded you by, you know, doing something that's been really quite incredible. And not just that, he's been at a hell of a lot of Toronto games. He's been an incredible supporter.
I was with him last weekend when I was with him last Sunday night.
What's your sense of, if they don't get promoted this year, what's your sense of the longevity of the project?
No, I think David's committed. Clearly it is down to one individual, but that isn't the only club in the competitions that are down to one individual. And certainly if you look across sport in the UK, you'll find that model all over the place. I think, as far as I know, and I say I was with him last Sunday night, he's really enjoying himself, I think, and he wants some success. You're right, Martin, he's ambitious about how we might go about that, no, I think he's around for a while. And
having been over there a few times, do you get the sense that the Canadians can differentiate, that they do know the difference between playing Toulouse last week and playing Oxford, for example, in their first game back at the Lamport?
Was that game?
Yeah. Do they understand that the club is on a journey, that it is getting tougher and tougher?
Yeah, well, absolutely they do. And to be honest, on the pitch, obviously life was quite easy in League One, but I thought they brought a lot to the League One competition, and you know, they may well be the forerunner to other clubs that might
bigger
come
crowds
in.
at other clubs, isn't
well, absolutely. They pretty much nailed every biggest home crowd in the UK, because not because they bring their own support, because they bring interest, and that's why I say they could be the forerunner to other clubs that come across.
But they are bringing, I mean, not significant amounts of support, but you go to a Toronto match, you are aware that there are Toronto fans there, which you don't always get when a Catalan team lands in town.
No, that's true.
Well, I think it's you know, there are Canadians in the country that care to come along and watch, certainly, don't they? And of course, they've produced us nearly 10,000 fans over there that we never had before. So why shouldn't we celebrate that fact?
The crucial thing, Ralph, though, is whether young kids in Toronto and the surrounding area start playing the game.
Absolutely,
whether they can actually set up junior clubs and so on.
Isn't that
forth. That's what they're trying to do.
Absolutely.
Of course it is.
The buzz phrase is putting a rugby ball in kids' hands all over the world.
They do talk about rugby, not rugby league, though, don't
They
they?
do.
Is that a problem?
Well, I don't know. Let's see how it works out. But I wish they'd talk about rugby league, though. I've got to say.
I just think it's different ways of skinning the cat.
Yeah.
In the first instance, if that's what gets us through the door, let's get through the door and then open it up after that.
Yeah, you know what worries me about that phrase is why would you want to skin a cat in the first place? It's just you're the traditionalist. Would you rather have a Cumbrian team in there than?
Well, I'd love to, but
Toronto?
it's not going to happen at the moment. No, I'm excited to see.
Yeah.
I'm excited to see Toronto up there. I'm keen to see how they do. I mean, after what we went through with the Crusaders, I did sort of start to think, well, maybe these clubs need to be in the lower divisions for a lot longer. But of course, Toronto have got the money and they can do this, and I think they'll go up, and I've got no doubt. So it'll be very interesting. It'll be very exciting, and I think it'll be a success.
Well, I think when we went about, and there were 4 prior to that, of course. When we went about new clubs coming into League One. League One was meant to be an incubator division, if you like. That clearly, anybody that progressed beyond it still had to beat some very, very strong traditional teams, but nevertheless, it gave a point of entry, which was at a point which wasn't at a great financial or reputational risk to the game. And the Toronto experiment worked the way through. You talk about Crusaders, that obviously we tried to enter at the top of the divisions, and the bar is just too high.
Yeah,
so
they did start in the
they did.
They just it took them 1 year
no,
longer.
That's right. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Sorry. So the whole idea was to give that opportunity for organic growth through the divisions and develop from there, or not. And if people died or clubs died because they couldn't cope with it, then that was fine. That was a part of the structure. And there's no doubt that the Toronto success has stimulated a great deal of other interest, whether it be credible or not, still needs to be determined.
Well, David has actually said, hasn't he, that he's actually glad that they started in League One. You know, and it was actually a big help to them. I mean, obviously they were playing, fairly low-level clubs in League One, but it allowed them to build up momentum and success.
They played low-level clubs, but they played clubs with the name of Oxford, Gloucester, Coventry.
And it's a shame we've lost those clubs.
Clubs that
London.
had resonated, London, absolutely.
Yeah.
And in some ways it was useful,
Yeah, interesting. Where are we at then with Red Star Belgrade, with Dublin Blues, with New York, with Boston, with Philadelphia? I mean, are all these clubs that are literally just around the corner? I mean, how far away are they from actually
geographically?
This is where we reveal an exclusive on this programme.
How serious an interest is there from any of these clubs that we've heard named in the last 12 months or so?
Some are serious, but to be honest,
who's not serious?
That's the wrong. I used the wrong expression. Some are more advanced than others.
Right. Can you tell us which are more advanced?
No, not really. No. Because I've put, we've got applications there. We have been completely absorbed in another piece of work, and I put everything on ice until we got there, because one of the key parts of this jigsaw that's been negotiated is the right for a club like that to come into the competition and understand that it can be promoted right through the divisions without any hindrance.
When do you think one might come in next to League One? As
I would think the 2020.
But it's definitely, from now on, it's always going to be coming in at League One level for any new club. There's going to be no straight into Super League or anything like that.
No straight into Super League.
But what if a French club, for example, which is probably where the more serious rugby league interest is at the moment? So what if a French club, what if a Toulouse pitched to Super League and said, forget about promotion, we're ready to come in, or a Villeneuve?
Well, I would discuss that with Super League, but I already have discussed it in advance, so I think it would be highly unlikely that anybody would go straight into Super League.
Right. Do you think that's the right way to do it?
I think so. I mean, we've seen it with Toronto, haven't we? The thing is that when you go straight into the highest possible level of a competition, it's really difficult to build up momentum and results, good results. You can't, it's hard to compete against teams that have been there for years and years and years. So, Toronto, as we've seen, just, blasted through League One and did extremely well in the championship, but did find it a bit harder, did lose some games. in the Championship. But I think by the time they get into Super League, if they do, then I think they'll be ready to, move to that next level. So, I had strong doubts about the model, I've got to say, when Toronto first came in. I wasn't sure that it would work, probably like most people, if we're honest about it. But, you've got to give credit to them and to the RFL and everybody else for moving ahead in that way. I think it's really been excellent.
The incubation league, as you call it, with the Coventries and Newcastles, who are two kind of, relatively speaking, optimistic clubs. You can get a little bit optimistic about them in particular. But you've got some traditional clubs in there. I mean, like Hunslet, for example. Yeah. Does it still work for everyone?
I think it does, and I say, there may well be some additions to it in the future. I think Toronto brought it to life and then moved through. I think there's other opportunities to do that. And you rightly point out the Coventries and Newcastles of this world, because I think there's something there in both of those. I mean, Coventry, I was at North Wales Crusaders on Sunday, but most of the crowd were glued to the Coventry result at Whitehaven. They thought they're going to do it, and they just got pipped in the end, but it was still fantastic, and they they're a well-run club. They get about 400 people there at this moment in time.
I think it's a great competition. I support Workington. It's been a very, very enjoyable year.
And anybody that gets out of it deserves to get out of it, because there's some tough games in there.
One thing I would like to see, Ralph, and I wrote about it this week, is some cooperation between Super League and some of these outlying areas where we can take Super League games. Bearing in mind that Super League are having these loop fixtures, let's try and persuade Super League clubs to take games, some of those loop games, to places like Coventry.
Yeah, like the Butts Park Arena.
Run a double header.
Yeah, you don't have to go to the Rico, do you? I mean, the Rico you might not fill for one of those games. Well, take it to the Butts Park Arena, and you would fill the Butts Park Arena.
Well, I think you'd do well at the
atmosphere.
Rico if it was adequately promoted, because I think Super League, one of the things about Super League now, we've got to get back to having a more aggressive promotion of the competition and trying to expand the footprint of the competition, because ultimately if Super League is going to get a really strong television deal next time, it's got to show that there's interest, quite widespread interest all over the country, not just on the M62 corridor. So
it does feel, I mean, I'm looking here and we remember it from a journalistic point of view. I'm not sure where you were at this stage, but were you at Sheffield? 96. It does have a feel at the moment, a little bit, not quite the same, a little bit of the feel of 96, whereby suddenly everything's possible at the moment. There's a lot of things that could happen.
The big prize in this project, this piece of work that's just taken place, was getting to that place. You could honestly, league structures, I'm not too distracted by those, providing promotion relegation is absolutely protected and we can make something of whatever we get and turn it into something exciting. I know that we can, but getting people on the same page to a place where we can realise ambitions like that, some of the things you've described, can only work if the game's working together.
We've reached a level of optimism, which means we have to take a break and go and drink a pint of peppermint tea just to cool down again. But Bill will be back and looking to reclimb that Everest of optimism in part 3 of Back Chat in just a few moments' time. Rugby League Back Chat is sponsored by TotalRL.com. Hello and welcome to the third and some would say final part of this week's Back Chat from the Pit Sports Bar in Leeds. With us today we've got Martyn Sadler, Ralph Rimmer and Richard de Riviere. And I've said that correctly every time. I was worried I was going to trip up, but I've said it. I've done it quite well, haven't I? Ralph, not everybody's happy this week. We've been talking about the smiles on faces and optimism. Salford fans are not happy. And perhaps London fans not either, because their fixture with 5 days notice has been switched from a Sunday to a Saturday. How can you justify that as the RFL?
Well, it comes down to player welfare in the end. What we try and avoid is for 4-day turnarounds. That's something we're committed to, and all the league are committed to that. So if Sky then move a game to the Thursday, then that has a kickback effect on the game that was to lead up to it. So it's something we've used before, and again, you know, something that's agreed between all the clubs in the competition.
Sky could have played on a Friday.
Well, you don't have that at Easter, do you? You don't have a full, you know, that's...
No, that's the one exception, and that's commercially driven. But nevertheless,
the double games last year as well.
Well, this is something we've talked about at length around the Super League table, and it is something we try and avoid. So once the Salford game went to the Thursday, that kicked back the London game.
But what about those poor Salford fans who've spent a lot of money to get down to London on a Sunday?
Bought train tickets.
It's not ideal, and clearly any late change in fixtures has an impact on those, but hopefully everybody understands the reasons for it.
Yeah.
It's a lot less than ideal, isn't it?
The other thing that's come out in the last week or so now, after this meeting, is another fixture that's is a bit of a strange one, is this game between the third team in League One and then Rochdale, if they come on. Because that's now been stapled onto the end of the season when players might potentially be on holiday. Yeah. They're both sort of not great PR, are they, for the game? And both could have been avoided.
Well, my glass is always half full, Richard. So, what we talked about when we talked about moving to 14 teams, clearly there has to be a mechanism to do that. Whatever mechanism you chose is not going to be ideal. However, what the philosophy we try and work on is you don't take anything away from anybody. So if people knew that there were teams going to relegate at the start of the year, that's okay if you don't tamper with that, unless you add to it. So you stop teams being relegated, nobody can complain. If you're giving somebody an extra bite at the cherry, which is what Rochdale will end up getting, then they get an opportunity to stay up. That does cause complications. They could, if they liked, not take it up, but nevertheless at the time, understanding the complications, the people in the room thought that was a very reasonable way to finish the end of the season. And there will be, accepting the fact there are some flaws in it, it will create some drama that didn't exist previously. How
does dual reg work for that game? Is it the same as the 8s?
Yeah, there's a set of rules which means dual reg. You can continue to dual reg players if players have already played 8 games for the teams involved in those things.
So there might be a few warranted players that they could,
providing they've passed that threshold.
Yeah. Right, let's talk about your position generally now. So with the game split in two in terms of 2 chief execs, Robert Elston looking after Super League Europe, you're looking after the rest of the game. So what is your remit? Now it's all been cleared up, what do you do?
Well, first of all, in some respects, we still look after the whole game because all the regulatory side of things, as far as Super League is concerned, falls to the Rugby League.
Discipline.
So that stays the same. And then I think from the RFL's point of view, we get to focus on what are our very real assets in all this. So of course, England winning World Cups in 2021, which is probably our biggest objective. We look at it every day to wonder how we can take that forward, and Kevin and the team are doing a great job there. The community game, there's plenty of work to do there on how we develop numbers and some of the ways that we change the game and try and make it more exciting and get people involved on the Our League app and just retain them is our attempt to adapt into the way those societal changes move, and people keeping the next rank of Tony Milers coming into the game at an early age so we can develop them. Championship of League One, of course, is huge for us, and we're really going to have a go at that and try and do something exciting with it. And one of the sort of time elements in all this, I suppose, was the prospect of starting to do something in Championship and League One for the year 2020. We'd have wasted a season there, a development season, which I think we can take good advantage of. And our league asset, which is about retention for fans all over the game.
Ralph, would it be a good idea to appoint somebody to promote the Championship in League One in a role that sort of mirrors Rob Elston's role, but obviously answerable directly to the RFL?
Yeah.
Because I think there's going to be some real great things happening potentially in the Championship next year, but it needs somebody to promote it and shout about it and develop strategies to generate more interest. I would say, and I think it could be quite rewarding if somebody does that. Somebody dedicated to that role who's got probably more time than you would have, given your wide-ranging responsibilities, and it's something I would particularly like to see.
It
I
is.
thought you were saying do then. I thought you were going to finish that sentence with the word do.
I would have liked to have done it at one time, but who knows?
I think everything's possible at this moment in time. We're going to refocus ourselves on the assets that we've just described, and we'll see what the best way through that is. We need to make those competitions punch, and I think we've got some exciting ideas for them and see what we can do. And if out of that it becomes obvious that somebody like that should be appointed, then we'll do it.
Will you have enough financial resources to be able to do the things you want? Because obviously there's going to be a reallocation under the agreement.
Well, there'll be no reallocation between now and 2021. That's the first instance.
But obviously
after
moving forward there will be, and you need to make sure that you've got the income that you require to do all the things that the RFL needs to do.
And that's why we need to get cracking straight away with 2019-2020 season to drive some value into those competitions.
Is there a realistic TV market for Championship and League One? Is that something that you'd investigate? Or
yes, that is some. But I think we need to make some changes to bring that to life.
Right. What changes?
Well, we've talked about potential teams coming in. I think we can do the new formats will be top 5 playoff. Each one of those top 5 playoff matches will become an event now because they're going to lead ultimately to somebody being promoted. So I think with some of the things that we will do internally, some of the focus that will be re-driven at those assets will make some change and make life a little bit more exciting.
But Sky hold the rights till 2021
yes.
for both Championship and League One.
Do, yes.
Right, so you can't explore that market till you're renegotiating that deal.
No, but we can drive some value into it.
Can you persuade Sky to screen any Championship games? Because next year you won't have the qualifiers, so Sky will presumably still do the Summer Bash.
Yes.
But will they do any other games?
Well, that's just for discussions between us going forward.
Yeah.
What about the Challenge Cup, Ralph? I mean, we had the final a month or so ago, 50,000 there. What ideas do you have
Again,
to take that back
I missed that. How could I do that? I missed that off the list of assets that we do. We know that needs a real look at. Clearly, Catalan getting to final presented some problems, but nevertheless, it also gave a bit of magic as well. And in the end, cup competitions, and I think you alluded, I was at Sheffield in '98 when we won in '98.
Yeah.
All those, and Hull winning as well. All those bits of magic that turn up in cups give them a bit of life. So we need to take advantage of that.
Sorry, what about the possibility of having an extra game there? Because in '97 we had something called the Silk Cup Plate, and I remember there being thousands of Hull Kingston Rovers fans there. And my main memory that day is Stanley Jean. And if you have a competition similar to that, not exactly like that, because a lot of teams wouldn't be able to take part because it was only for the losers from the 4th round. But if you have, say, the equivalent of a Northern Rail Cup final played, say, between Lee and Featherstone, you'd put 20,000 on the game.
You're one step ahead of us. That's one thing we're looking at this moment in time. But you have to understand that at this moment in time, Wembley are resistant to a second game. So there's lots of stakeholders in this, but nevertheless, it is something we are looking at. And there's some change coming at Wembley. We're mixed up in those talks as well because they're being bought by an American company.
Will that damage the prospect of the Challenge Cup being at Wembley? Because obviously they're going to. I mean, people think they're going to bring an American football team to play regularly at Wembley, which might, interfere with the Challenge Cup final, because of course they begin their season at roughly the time when we play the Challenge Cup final.
If the Challenge Cup's played at that time.
Indeed.
Well, there's lots of ifs and ands in that sentence. We are in discussions with them at this moment in time.
With the potential new owners?
Yes.
Yeah.
To just work out exactly how we fit in the terms and conditions. There doesn't seem to be any resistance at all to
so
us
they're
being there.
happy to.
And there is some change coming in one way or another, and that might be some change that we might be able to take advantage of. So as always, it's multi-layered, but there are opportunities.
And I don't think we've ever had this conversation in the past, but changing the time and date of the Challenge Cup, August. As you know, there's an element within the BBC, there's an element within the Super League clubs who are saying let's move it back earlier.
Yeah, I think there's a good case for that. Wembley has been, until this point, one of the drivers in it being on August Bank Holiday weekend. But I do think there's some change around. It might give us some opportunities to change.
Ralph, if you move it to May, though, how do you stop the early rounds feeling like pre-season matches?
Yes,
because they always did. In '96, '97, even the semi-finals were played before the first.
But then we were kicking off in March.
Yeah, all right. But the fourth,
May
fifth round,
be too soon, but certainly moving it forward may be an opportunity.
But traditionally, in the whole history of rugby league, and Richard will know this probably better than I do, the Challenge Cup final and the old Championship final came almost on successive weekends, or perhaps with 2 weeks between them. I recall, Wakefield Trinity in the 1960s winning the Challenge Cup and then, being in the Championship final, you know, 2 weeks later, and you know that was an incredible climax to the rugby league season in that it really built it up and generated fantastic excitement. And by moving the Challenge Cup earlier in the season, I think it makes it look a less important competition.
But it's not generating the excitement now, is it? We have that.
Well,
I mean, when Leeds won the treble, you could say that. I mean, Jamie Jones-Buchanan has gone on record, for example, saying he thinks it works great as it stands because you've got that. Can they win the Challenge Cup? Can they then go and win the Grand Final? But that doesn't happen very often.
No, it doesn't.
And you can derail your season with a bad Challenge Cup final, can't you?
Well, but that's the test, isn't it? You put clubs to the test of whether they can actually, you know, win the Challenge Cup and then go on to win the other trophy. And you know, I think that's all part of what makes rugby league great. And
the Challenge Cup has never really been right since the mid-90s. I mean, the move to summer really caused problems for the Challenge Cup.
It wasn't
weren't
thought through
addressed.
at the time.
Same with the international game.
Yeah.
That's right.
Well, let's get on to the international game because you're in charge of England and presumably Great Britain as well.
Yep.
Great Britain have got a tour down under next year, we're told. I mean, how close is that to being absolutely confirmed with dates and venues?
Well, I'll be leaving here and tomorrow morning, hopefully working through some of the complications in that. We're getting to a good place on it. We're not quite nailed on, but we're getting to a good place.
So just give us generally the idea of how that tour's going to look.
I think there'll be games that will involve Oceania Cup countries plus New Zealand, and I'm due to speak to Todd as I leave this room about Australia, so we'll see how we go.
Yeah.
Would that be an Ashes series?
I would doubt that. I don't doubt that on this.
It'd be
I think it'd be more mixed up. But,
And are you anticipating that, I'm not asking for very selfish reasons because I might be going, but would you be anticipating Great Britain playing in Papua New Guinea, in Tonga, in Samoa, places like that, or would they be playing those matches, for example, Tonga in Auckland?
Probably a mix.
Yeah, almost felt like a home game in the semi-finals.
Probably a mix of the two. I think we're just boiling that down as we speak.
And Richard, how excited are you, given your links to your historical bent? How excited are you that Great Britain's back on the agenda?
Well, yeah, it's nice, but it needs to come back, and this is what I want to ask you. It needs to come back on a permanent basis after that, apart from World Cups, because when we went from Great Britain to England, it didn't really solve anything. It just created problems with eligibility. We went into the 09 and 11 Four Nations finals, and we couldn't have Danny Brough and Lee Briers, which otherwise we would have had them, and we went in those finals with no halfbacks. You solve a lot of problems if you just bring it back as Great Britain for the home series as well. I never got what scrapping Great Britain achieved.
Well, clearly at the time it was an attempt to expand the game and generate some greater RLIF presence.
But it failed.
And I still,
But you can still do that with Great Britain, can't you?
It worked much better when you had a two-tier
to some extent,
and
it
Scotland
was
Island.
two-tier competitions. Look, I think the international calendar needs a bit of work. I know Nigel works very hard on it, but that's not without complication as well. But you know, all of these things you're speaking of, though, just demonstrate how many pieces of the jigsaw are on the table and how exciting it is.
Mid-season test next year? Obviously not Denver,
I think it's unlikely next year. I think it's unlikely.
We don't think we'll have a mid-season test?
No, I think it's unlikely next year. The year after and the year after that. In the
Who, where?
That's all a part of the conversation we're having currently.
And what's the situation with Denver at the moment? I mean, we understand you'd not been paid by the promoter and you were taking legal action. Is that the situation?
Commercially sensitive, I think, is the word you're looking
for.
In
other words, probably yes.
And if you were a betting man, how likely is a 2025 World Cup going to be in North America?
I think there are some serious question marks over that, and that's an RLIF discussion. So, of course, what's gone on in the last 12 months or so. Despite the fact, on event-wise, it was a great event.
Had a great performance by England,
actually. A great performance. I thought we were very accomplished on that day.
Yeah. Would England bid? Would the RFL bid to host again in 2025? If it was up for grabs?
We would bid, but on the back of the fact we would held one in 2021, I would think unlikely would be.
Could you get France to?
France would be great.
Host it? I'd love to see it in France. I would love to see it.
Maybe some sort of.
Would we get the big crowds in France? I mean, I know we'd get 10,000.
Well, they always do.
Well, yeah, but 10,000. We need a World Cup needs 50,000 crowds for its opener and its final, and big crowds for its semi. I don't think we'd get those in France.
Not necessarily, but
well,
you never know.
The Catalan people reckon that if the Challenge Cup final had been played in Paris, that they would have taken 40,000. I mean, that might be an idle boast, but there's obviously
or even in Barcelona.
I'd love to see it happen, but we got over ambitious in 2000, and that fell because it was a bit too ambitious with locations. If we keep World Cups in England and Australia,
Well, it was underfunded.
Yeah,
There was the
yeah.
2000
there's
World
lots
Cup
of
as
things wrong
well.
with that one.
Well, let's not go back down to 2000.
We're on a roll. Why are we going
Yeah,
back?
we were
We're on a
so
roll.
optimistic at the end of part 2, and we're still optimistic at the end of part 3 as well. That's just about as far as we go for this week's programme. Don't forget, you can find out all the details of what's happening on this channel. Go to our website, there it is, www.freesports.tv. Don't forget the final S in that. But that's as far as we go for this programme today. Thanks as ever to our panel, to Martyn Sadler, to Ralph Rimmer, and also to Richard de la Riviere. Until next time, goodbye. Rugby League Backchat is sponsored by TotalRL.com.